So Clint Skutchan is going to be talking to us about the future of housing. And Clint brings his expertise from the Fort Collins Board of Realtors. He wants us to move from looking for a silver bullet to using holistic thinking and shifting our action for a successful future of housing. So please help me welcome Clint.
So I'm a little more tightly wound than most of your other speakers, so I'm going to move around and I'm going to talk fast so that you can keep up with me. I do want to thank the folks here at University Connections. I've been engaged with this group actually since the very beginnings of this, so it's exciting to see this group here today and to have this opportunity. So I'm talking about the future of housing, and housing obviously is a basic need, and it's right up there with medical and food and water and those types of aspects of our community. And so from that standpoint, it's very, very important. But beyond that, with the Fort Collins Board of Realtors, I'm the CEO there. A couple of years ago, we took on this effort to protect our housing future. And important to that, over the last couple of years, it's been a part of our strategic plan, has been to focus on affordable, meaning achievable in this community, so that there's an entire continuum of housing available in the community for all those who are at different levels of wages. And certainly there are a lot of important conversations going on right now around this. Why is it important to have that housing continuum? Well, we believe that houses are more than just homes. They actually are made up of those who build our community. They are our community culture, those who live in these houses. We live, we work, we play here. Those are the folks that actually end up making up our community's culture. Imagine this. Is anyone recognizing this conversation with our community right now? Small town versus big city, and that's kind of us in the middle. And we're quickly emerging and becoming more of a metropolitan area. We eclipsed the 100,000 mark, which defines a metropolitan area some time ago. But in reality, now that we've gotten over the 150,000 mark, we're starting to really see more of an urban lifestyle. And so this is bringing about a lot of changes in our community. And the demographics are shifting. I came here over 20 years ago, and it's a much different community than when I arrived here 20 years ago. It was very agrarian still. It still had that CSU flavor. My uncle had come here to do the ag studies, those types of things. It still had that, and we still have this small town flair, but clearly the demographics of our community are shifting. There were allusions to the silver tsunami that's happening, the millennials are coming in. I'm one of those unfortunate exes that's somewhere lost in the middle of all this, but our demographics are clearly shifting in this community, and it's reshaping who we are. These changes that we're seeing right now are dramatic and swift from an affordability standpoint. I'm going to go over some of these things, but before I do, show of hands in the room. We all know about Boulder's situation in the world. It's actually, according to a report last year, Boulder's the 39th least affordable place on the planet to live. Now, show of hands, Fort Collins or Boulder, which one is more affordable to live in?
Fort Collins.
Fort Collins? Boulder. Who thinks it's more affordable to live in Boulder? Well, technically, by our Housing Affordability Index, this is generated through MLS data that's based on local sold purchases, those types of things. And then this index runs basically through this little pattern of items here. It's showing that Fort Collins is actually less affordable than Boulder. In large part because Boulder has culled a lot of their median age or medium wage income earners. They're living on the peripheries of their community. In Boulder, and by the way, the lower the number, the more the less affordable it is here. So Boulder on the left here, the 119, that's their score for single family housing. The 155 is their score for townhouses, condos, that type of thing. This is as of April, by the way. Fort Collins scores 116 and 153. We actually went down this month. We just released our numbers. We're down to 114 on the single family housing side. And again, it's made up of the aspects of what overall impacts the community. Colorado's been doing this great series. Has everybody seen this? We've been following this series. Colorado's doing this amazing series of stories, and it outlines the difficulty and the challenges that we're having with our change in affordability right now. And so kudos to them for that. Why is that? What's the great influencer right now? One of those biggest influencers that myself, as well as my organization, the Board of Realtors, is focused on is the lack of availability. Again, this comes from our housing reports, which you can find them. They're free. They're published each month, fcr.org/housing reports. And what you see here, and I know you can't read all the numbers necessarily, but what you can see is the trend line. And this is the number of houses that are listed. So, think about it in these terms. This is my hometown, Delta, Colorado. This is where I grew up and moved from about 20 plus years ago. It's a town of around 5,000 when I left. It's now 8,000. If you think about Fort Collins, we're around that 155,000 mark, and we're growing at around roughly a 3% rate. We're adding a town this size each year. Or I guess the better way to say it is, we need to be adding a town of this size from a housing standpoint. And while the housing is starting to keep up, you saw the Coloradoans article again talking about building permits not keeping up with the demand. This is why we're quite literally having a small town commute to us every year and come here and become a part of our community. And so we have to keep up with that. With that comes infrastructure demands and needs. And in particular, one that's of importance was discussed last night at City Council in kind of relation to the northeast portion of our community where there's a large opportunity for development, are the challenges of roads, water, and the costs that go along with that. These are really big barriers to people bringing housing units onto the market right now. There's an issue up northeast where some of the water taps are costing as much as $20,000 additionally above what it would take to get one of those same water taps in the city of Fort Collins. Multiply that by doing 100 units, and then that really starts to become a huge barrier to someone bringing stock online right now. Not to mention some of the big bottlenecks that are up there around the Vine Domain area. Beyond that, we have this, politics, and anyone familiar with this? Sometimes it makes me feel like this when I watch City Council on a Tuesday night. That's a barrier to this. It gets all sorts of funny and weird when we start talking about development and those types of things when we involve the politics. Beyond that, Fort Collins has an interesting phobia that I've noted. It's a growth phobia. And it's one that's happened over 20 years, and I think there's this sense for so many that when they get here, they never want this place to change because it's amazing. But we have to think about and understand that growth doesn't always equate to negative aspects of our community. I've been here 20 plus years. I know people who've been here all their lives, and most of them say the quality of life has gone up throughout that entire time. So we need to, at times, set that aside and focus on how can we maintain what we have rather than be worried about what might come our way. And then there's this. Everyone has their own version of this, right? And you can't see it up here, but it kind of outlines some of the aspects that go into this. So we have students in this community that make it complicated. You know, some folks don't want to live next to students, but the reality is we all have to share this world together, especially in the areas that surround our universities. Beyond that, we have infill and growth challenges that are difficult, and people have different ideas about that. Sprawl versus upward growth, and we really have challenges there. And everybody's got their own idea of utopia, and probably the biggest influencer over that utopia is when it's occurring where? Right outside of your yard, right? The whole sense of NIMBY. We do struggle with this at times because we have people that support our bigger concepts until at such time that it becomes a direct impact to them and their lifestyle. So, what do we need to do? Right now, one of the biggest things that myself and the Board of Realtors are advocating for is a change of the trajectory. A lot of what we focused in on, and again, more housing data for you here, and what I want you to look at is the trend line. These are the median sales prices, and again, just new numbers came out today. Median sales prices continue to go up. They're at near all-time highs, $325,000 for a single-family home this past month. Overall, single-family and the combined housing, it's around $300,000 is a median income, or a median household price, excuse me. So what we need to do is to start to change this trajectory. And I think to do that, one of the things we have to acknowledge and be okay with is there's no silver bullet for this. There's not going to be one thing that changes this. There's no one single thing that changes this. But that doesn't change the fact that we need to continue to work towards changing this trajectory. Right now, we're seeing historic increases in our market, and that, if not changed now, is going to have continued historic impacts for the long term. So if we can start to move that down ever so slightly now, it has compounding factors over time. And the way that we're advocating for this to happen, and the Board of Realtors and myself, we believe that we need to have holistic approaches. Last night, City Council discussed and had the first look at the affordable housing strategic plan. They updated that in 5 years. And we continue to say, while it's important to look at those programs and services, the biggest impact in the area where the city can have some of the biggest influences is when they look at the overall affordability of housing and start to look at the infrastructure and look at some of those larger elements they can have an impact on to address the issue we talked about earlier, which is lack of inventory. So, beyond that, what is it that we can do to change this and why you all are hopefully in this room? One, shift our thinking. I've been engaged with local politics for well over a decade, and I've seen this shift over the last several years, and it's a shift that's filtering down from the national level, and it's really this us versus them mentality. And some of the millennials, frankly, are really engaged in this. I think we've got to really work hard to get beyond this type of approach in our community because our decisions that we make here matter. And they get made on a regular basis. It's not like DC. Beyond that, what do we need to do? We need to shift our action. We really need to start to address the issues of infrastructure that I've talked about. Because a lack of infrastructure equals a lack of inventory, and right now that equals increased housing costs. And we just can't continue on this path. So we need to address that, and it, again, gets very political when we talk about things like water. Embrace height and density. This community does not really support the idea of height in particular, but it is going to be a part of our future. Greater density is going to be a part of our future, and we have to start to identify with that, realize that that's a thing, and how will we manage that and make it fit for Fort Collins. We can't pretend like it's never going to happen. In particular, it has to happen along the Mason corridor, where right now we're at about a quarter of the density that we need to support mass transit. And without that transit, the live, work, play aspect of Mason doesn't work out. We also need to stick to our comprehensive visions. We have city plan. We have those items that have outlined how we should approach this, the actions that we should take. Last night, again, City Council, did anyone watch City Council? It was a huge night. Any of you watched that? It was a huge night. They talked about maybe downsizing the areas out north and east of town. They were going to possibility of removing 6,000 units of housing and 12,000 potential jobs because of a downsizing to give it more of a rural character. That really pushes that growth that was being talked about by Terry out into those other areas and creates so many other issues. We have a city plan. We need to adhere to it, and it's not always easy in a political standpoint. And finally, we need to shift who's involved. I'm grateful for the fact that there's so many of you who are new to this, and this is your first time here. I far too often spend time in rooms, and I love you, Gary, but you and I spend way too much time together with too many familiar people. We've got to shift who's involved. Not just from an age standpoint, but from a skill set and an interest, and from any number of levels of diversity. We really need to work on this in this community, those who are engaged and involved, to help reshape those conversations moving forward. I want to thank you for the time. Again, our focus has been on affordable equals achievable. You can learn more about it at fcr.org/housingfuture. I look forward to visiting with you here in just a moment.